Hello there. Today, I'm going to tell you about some of the most mysterious and famous urban legends. First, the Inunaki Tunnel. The first story takes us to Japan, where we encounter the mystery of the Inunaki Tunnel. What makes this particularly scary is that this tunnel actually exists. It's a real place that's become quite infamous. Back in 1988, there was a man who was parking his car near a quiet road, and suddenly a group of 5 young men approached him. What started as a car theft quickly escalated into something much darker. You see, these young men somehow managed to lure the man out of his vehicle and drag him away from safety. But that wasn't enough for them. These criminals then proceeded to beat the man mercilessly just because they didn't like his face. After their brutal assault, they stuffed him into his own trunk and drove off with his car. While they were driving back to their hideout, the man actually managed to escape from the trunk. However, those young men quickly discovered his escape and chased him down. Since the man was already injured from the beating, he simply couldn't outrun his attackers, and inevitably, he was caught once again. This is where the story takes an even darker turn. Those young men drove to a tunnel and dumped their victim there. At this point, they realized if they let him go, he would definitely report them to the police, despite the poor man promising not to do so. So they made a decision. They had to kill him. What happened next is truly disturbing. They doused him with gasoline and burned him alive, then callously got back in their car and drove away, leaving the man to die in agony in that very tunnel. And this is where the rumor begins. People now believe that if you dare to pass through this tunnel, you'll hear the echoes of his dying screams or catch glimpses of ghostly shadows. But wait, there's actually another urban legend connected to this same tunnel. You see, right at the Inunaki Tunnel, locals claim that when you walk through it, you might stumble upon a hidden place. A mysterious village called Inunaki Village. According to local people, near the tunnel, a couple's car broke down. Since they needed help, they decided to venture through the tunnel on foot. After walking for some time, they encountered something bizarre. A sign that read, "The Japanese Constitution has no effect here." Naturally, people would find this strange, but this couple didn't care much about it and continued walking. Eventually, they discovered what appears to be an abandoned village. However, silently from the mist, an old man emerges to speak with them. Here's where things get truly unsettling. Although this man is clearly speaking, the couple can't understand a single word he's saying. Then, from behind them, a group of villagers approaches, and ominously, they're all carrying sickles. Without warning or explanation, these villagers murdered the couple, though the exact reason remains unclear. People believe it was for cannibalistic purposes. Now, when I first heard this story, I immediately knew it had to be an urban legend. I mean, just think about it logically. If there really was a sign declaring that the Constitution has no effect here, it would create massive legal problems and become a haven for criminals. Furthermore, since the village itself never existed in the first place, this is clearly a work of fiction. Second, the Dulce base.
Dulce base urban legend.
When it comes to the most famous conspiracy theories about UFOs in America, you absolutely cannot overlook the story of a secret underground base beneath the small town of Dulce, New Mexico. People call it the Dulce base urban legend. Our main character, Phil Schneider, a geological engineer who had worked on underground tunnel construction projects for the U.S. military. Interestingly enough, his father, Oscar Schneider, had also been involved in Navy projects related to classified military technology. In 1979, Phil was assigned to participate in a tunnel excavation project beneath Archuleta Mesa, near the town of Dulce. The military had deployed a massive number of soldiers, far more than the technical workers. They were divided into groups wearing different colored helmets, which were known markers of Delta Force Special Operations. Phil understood this wasn't an ordinary underground construction project, but nobody was allowed to question anything. The project began with drilling 4 vertical shafts, each descending more than 4 kilometers deep. Initially, the drilling equipment functioned normally, but when they reached the 4th hole, problems arose continuously, drill bits breaking, engines failing. After numerous attempts, Phil's team realized they had drilled into a large hollow space underground. This proved there was either a natural cave down there, or perhaps a tunnel. Immediately, a total of 69 people, mostly soldiers along with some engineers like Phil, were ordered to descend into the shaft for inspection. What's strange is that superiors required everyone, including engineers and workers, to carry weapons. Clearly, the higher-ups were hiding something, and down there, something truly terrifying must have been waiting for them. The elevator slowly lowered them into the Earth's depths. Phil recounted that when the elevator doors opened, the scene before him was a vast, dark chamber reeking of heavy ammonia. Several meters away stood 3 strange creatures. 2 were small, about 1.5 meters tall, and 1 towered at 2.3 meters. All had pale gray skin and large black eyes occupying half their faces. Phil called them Greys, the most common alien species among the 11 types he mentioned in his public disclosures. According to Phil, the taller Grey appeared to be the leader, highly intelligent and calm, while the two shorter Greys were extremely aggressive and bloodthirsty, like humans' hounds. The conflict erupted when a soldier opened fire. Instantly, the tall creature raised its hand, and a blue light flashed. An energy beam pierced through Phil's chest, burning off 2 of his fingers. He collapsed, feeling his entire body torn apart by an electric current. Around him, Special Forces soldiers fired intensely, but were systematically taken down because the alien weapons proved far superior to human technology. Phil recalled that chaotic moment. A soldier in a green beret rushed forward, pushed him back into the elevator. The elevator carried him to the surface. When he regained consciousness in the hospital, Phil was informed that of the 69 people who descended, only 3 survived. He was one of those 3. Later, Phil claimed that the gunfight with the aliens that day was just the tip of the iceberg. He believed Dulce Base had at least 7 levels. The top 4 floors were for humans, with engineers and military operating there. The bottom 3 floors were under alien control. Rumors suggested there were genetic laboratories conducting human-alien hybridization. By 1995, Phil began publicly revealing what he knew at conferences. He took off his shirt to show people his scars, his missing fingers, and even brought strange metal fragments, claiming they were alien materials. He repeatedly emphasized that the US government was hiding an underground agreement with extraterrestrials, trading technology for the right to experiment on animals, and even humans. But less than a year later, in January 1996, Phil Schneider was found dead in his apartment. Police declared he had committed suicide by strangling himself with medical rubber tubing. However, this was extremely illogical. With his disabled arm and missing fingers, he could barely strangle himself. Even more suspicious, after his death, all documents, photos, and evidence he had previously disclosed. Today, the story of Dulce Base remains divisive. Some argue it's merely an embellished conspiracy theory, but others believe Phil Schneider paid with his life to reveal a horrifying truth, that right beneath our feet, there may exist an underground world where humans and aliens once shed blood. Third, the Bunny Man. Moving on to our next story, we travel to America to explore the legend of the Bunny Man, a terrifying figure who, as the name suggests, is a man dressed like a rabbit. And believe it or not, this legend has some disturbing roots in reality. The story begins in 1904 in the small town of Clifton, Virginia. In this residential area, there was a mental hospital that housed patients with various psychological disorders. However, the local residents weren't comfortable with this. They complained that they didn't want to live alongside mental patients in their community. As a result, authorities decided to transfer these patients to another facility. So all the mental patients were loaded onto a bus for transportation to a different location. But then disaster began. While the bus was traveling along the route, it suddenly derailed and crashed with tremendous force. The impact was so severe that the door burst open, and in the chaos that followed, all the patients managed to escape and scattered in different directions. Then the police immediately launched a massive search operation. And here's the remarkable part. They managed to track down and recapture every single patient, except for one. There was one patient named Douglas Griffin who seemed to have vanished into thin air, and despite extensive searching, he was never found. And later, the police discovered something really disgusting in a nearby forest. They found numerous rabbit carcasses that showed clear signs of being consumed by predators. The locals believed these rabbits were eaten by the missing patient who, driven by extreme hunger and having nothing else to eat, had resorted to catching and eating wild rabbits to survive. Now, near this town, there was a bridge, not particularly large, but underneath it was a small tunnel that looked absolutely terrifying when darkness fell. And it was at this very tunnel the horrifying story took shape. On one Halloween night, a group of children were playing in the area when they noticed a strange light emanating from inside the tunnel. Curiosity got the better of them, so they decided to investigate and ventured inside to see what was causing the mysterious glow. The next morning brought a horrific discovery. Someone found the bodies of 3 children hanging upside down from the bridge, suspended just like hunted rabbits. Even more disturbing, their internal organs had been removed. The person responsible for this gruesome crime was almost certainly that escaped mental patient, and from that day forward, people began calling him the Bunny Man. According to the legend that emerged, if you dare to visit this tunnel on Halloween night, you risk being killed by the Bunny Man and suffering the same fate as those poor children. Now, while this is certainly a terrifying story, it's important to note that it's largely fictional. Several key details simply don't add up historically. For instance, there was never actually a mental hospital in Clifton or anywhere near that bridge. Additionally, in 1904, buses weren't commonly used for transportation. In fact, they were practically non-existent, so this is clearly a fictional tale. Fourth, Bloody Mary. If you are a fan of necromancy, then let me introduce you to a very creepy one. Bloody Mary summoning. This ritual itself is straightforward but quite scary. First, you need to find a room that has a mirror. Next, you turn off all the lights to create as much darkness as possible. Then you approach the mirror, perhaps carrying a candle to provide just a hint of illumination. Here comes the crucial part. You must look directly into the mirror and repeatedly chant, Bloody Mary. Some say you only need to say Bloody Mary 3 times. Others say 13 times, while some versions claim you must say it up to 47 times. Honestly, I don't know the exact number, but I think you should keep saying it until something supernatural happens. After finishing your chanting, you'll supposedly see a woman in the mirror, slowly stepping out from the glass itself. This ghostly figure is Bloody Mary, and according to the legend, she will then proceed to strangle you or claw at your face. Definitely not the kind of behavior that you expect for her, but here's what I find fascinating. I wanted to dig deeper and discover who this Bloody Mary actually was. And what I found was a connection to real historical events that are far more disturbing than any ghost story. In 1553, there lived a woman named Mary Tudor, who ruled as Queen of England. In her castle, there was a man named John Rogers who served as a Protestant pastor. Now, here's where the historical tragedy begins. Queen Mary was a devout Catholic, and she harbored an intense hatred for anyone who followed Protestantism. She believed that all Protestants were heretics, and they needed to be eliminated. And unfortunately for John Rogers, he became her first victim. When John was captured and imprisoned, he was given a choice. The authorities told him that if he wanted to continue living, he would have to renounce his Protestant faith and convert to Catholicism. However, Rogers was a man of unwavering conviction, and he absolutely refused to abandon his religious beliefs. So, on one fateful day, they erected a wooden stake in a public area and bound John Rogers to it with heavy chains. Then, they piled wooden logs underneath the stake. A large crowd gathered to witness what was about to unfold, and several people were assigned the grim task of lighting those logs on fire, burning John Rogers alive. But Mary's religious persecution didn't end there. She continued this reign of terror, burning many more Protestants alive. In total, she was responsible for the deaths of approximately 283 people, all because of their religious beliefs. This horrific campaign of religious persecution earned her the notorious nickname Bloody Mary, and many historians believe this is the connection to our ghostly legend.